Can we have one major public official that is not a single degree separated from Jeffrey Epstein? Is that possible? Because apparently it's not possible. You got Donald Trump talking about the issue the other day on camera, and the guy standing next to him is Howard Lutnick, who was Epstein's neighbor for years, you know.
In New York, on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah. It's like, can we just get like one important person who's not 1 degree or less separated from the most prolific mass pedophile in U.S. history? Is that possible? You know, because apparently it's not.
It's amazing how many people he intersected with.
Yeah,
in his life.
I remember when Anthony Blinken became Secretary of State, and you know, I've been following the Epstein story and just all the connections with it for a long time by then, and so I knew that Anthony Blinken's stepfather was Robert Maxwell's like closest confidant, his lawyer, and the last person to speak to him before he died.
Before he was murdered.
Yeah, probably, yeah. The West Palm Beach Police Department starts looking into the guy, starts gathering more information, starts talking to more witnesses. And very quickly, this thing starts expanding out so that 2 witnesses becomes 4, and 4 becomes 8, and 8 becomes 16. It's like expanding a lot, and they're realizing they have a big issue on their hands. You know, they interview like the chief of police in West Palm Beach there at the time, and you can see he is just flabbergasted, outraged, just, you know, to the point where, you know, he says at one point that it cost him his faith in the U.S. criminal justice system, you know, because he was getting stonewalled like crazy at the local level. People in his department or somewhere in the local government were leaking the information of the investigation to Jeffrey Epstein. And so he does something that you don't do as a chief of police. He just went completely around his chain of command and went directly to the feds himself and said, I'm going to bring the feds in. Like, clearly the state and the local officials are just too corrupted. And so he gives it over to the feds. And that's when it ends up in the lap of Alex Acosta, who was the Southern District of Florida U.S. attorney at the time. So he hands it over to the feds, and open and shut. I mean, how do you get away from 40 on the record corroborating independent witnesses, right? You can discredit 1 or 2 or 10. You still got 30 left, you know? One of the things, for example, they found out was that the computers that had been taken out of his house in West Palm Beach were in the possession of somebody connected to Epstein's lawyers. And so she put out a Department of Justice subpoena demanding those computers from the lawyers and the people. And the lawyers kind of, you know, they delay and have meetings and, you know, put things off and so forth. And these are some of them people we've heard of, Alan Dershowitz, people like that. So in the 1990s, Wexner and Edgar Bronfman, who I mentioned earlier, one of the heirs to the Seagram's liquor fortune, who was one of Jeffrey Epstein's clients when he was working at Bear Stearns, those 2 guys founded a group called the Study Group, but it's more commonly known as the Mega Group. That came out in the papers a little bit in the late 1990s. Not a lot was written about it. It was a group of, at first, about 20, but then later it expanded, Jewish billionaires in the United States and Canada who would meet at least twice a year to get together and just coordinate how they were distributing their philanthropic money, what their focuses were for that year, just making sure they were all acting in concert to help serve the interests of Israel in their respective countries. And they would finance scholars and other professionals to write up papers and studies and analyses for the Israeli government, for Israeli intelligence, for example, and they were very plugged into that. And very, very, very connected to the Israeli government and specifically Israeli intelligence through the work that they would do for the Israelis. And so, you know, again, just one more sort of connection there to the intelligence world among people who were very, very, very close to Jeffrey Epstein. If you were a wealthy person in Washington, D.C. or New York City or West Palm Beach, Florida, you knew who Jeffrey Epstein was and you knew what had happened to him and you knew what he had done. His private plane was nicknamed the Lolita Express. Lolita is a novel written by Nabokov about a guy, based on a true story actually, about a guy who takes a 12-year-old girl, kidnaps her, and takes her on a kind of odyssey across the country, raping her over the course of those 2 years.
It's a novel about child molestation.
It's a novel about child molestation, and his airplane was nicknamed the Lolita Express. It was not given that nickname by him. It was given that nickname by other people. Other people knew who this guy was. They knew what he was doing. If literally any one of my male friends or family members, any of them, if we got invited to go somewhere on some dude's plane, and you walk onto that plane, and as soon as you get in the air, 5 or 6 underage girls who are not related to him come out in their underwear and start offering massages, my responses to that are going to vary between like which level of criminal action am I going to take against this guy? Am I going to beat him senseless? Am I going to throw him out of this flying plane? You know, those are basically the range of outcomes in that situation. And that's true for almost everybody that almost everybody watching this knows. And so regular people hear about this and they're like, they almost have trouble believing that it's possible because they don't know anybody who would have such a cavalier reaction. One of the things is everybody remembers hearing about spirit cooking. You know, the performance artist Marina Abramovich did this event that the Podestas were invited to and apparently enjoyed very much called spirit cooking. And what, pray tell, is spirit cooking, Tucker? It was a performance art piece, a dinner event, where the attendees would go and sit in rooms with white walls and eat meals off of mock corpses in tubs of blood with weird, creepy messages about cutting the finger on your left hand and eating the pain and drinking fresh breast milk with fresh sperm milk on earthquake nights, all these crazy edgelord art school, you know, things that are kind of just embarrassing. But, you know, these weird cryptic sayings written in goat's blood on the walls. In one room, there's an effigy of an infant with a bucket of goat's blood thrown all over it. There's another room where there's a bunch of shelves with little figures put in positions of various positions of copulation. You know, there's photos from these events that Abramovich would put on. You know, Lady Gaga's there eating off of one of these mock corpses. Gwen Stefani's at one of them. And, you know, they're there at these places where, you know, forget about, you know, people want to say, oh, this is a satanic ritual. Forget about all that. Forget about all that. Just think about, like, if this was your friend or your brother or your sister and they went to this thing, or if they brought you to this thing, you'd be like, what are we doing here? What is this exactly, right? And so the next thing that came out.
Wouldn't you run immediately?
So, again, you would, I would, everybody we know would, everybody
and
listening.
Tony and Heather Podesta went to this.
Mm-hmm. And well, I don't know if Heather did or not, but he and John did. And so Tony's a big art collector. I made the point of going and buying the copy of Architectural Digest and Washington Life magazine that profiled his apartment and his art collection. And on the walls, in the photographs, in these magazines, okay, there's a lot of different art there, but like the most prominent ones one's a mural size centerpiece of a room. The others are poster size, like big, important, prominent pieces that he's got out for everybody to see, are by a Serbian artist named Biljana Đurđević. And they're part of a series of paintings that, according to the artist's own interviews, are based on explorations of child molestation, sexual assault, and just childhood trauma and abuse in general. And it is, there are a lot of paintings in the series, but the ones that show up in the magazine piece, for example, one, the great big mural one, is a bunch of young girls. They look like maybe teenagers, 12-year-olds or something, who are lying in a circle. It's called Synchronized Swimming is the name of the painting, lying in a circle at the bottom of like a tiled room or something. And they all have this spaced out, kind of dead, drugged out look in their eyes. And some of them have black eyes, and they're just sort of laying there. And so
I don't want to be ruled by people like this.
Well, so let me just keep, because this gets so much worse.
Oh, you're upsetting me because I lived in this world for so long and I intentionally ignored this. But now that you are describing it, I'm like, I can't even believe I was in the same county as people like that. I would look,
if I was into art that featured tied up prepubescent children in their underwear by an artist that says this is all about child sexual assaults, what this series of paintings is about. If I was into that, I would at least take it all down before company came over. These were rooms that he threw his parties in. He invited people over to. I would definitely take them down before Architectural Digest.
But if you were into them, like let me just be clear, being into something like that means that you are on an evil path. That's evil. I don't know what to say. Like, an image like that, it's also obvious now that I have distance from it. That's bad.
He was asked in an interview about some of his favorite artists. One of them that he listed was a woman named Patricia Piccinini, who does, I guess, sculptures, you would say. I don't know if they're clay sculptures or whatever, and they're really grotesque images of, a small girl standing up on her bed, maybe 5 years old, with this demon thing with its claws around her, kind of leering at her. There's one with this sort of weird pig monster spooning this little boy in his bed with pustules on its back. There's a lot of mouths that look like sphincters and vaginas, and the kids are playing with them. It's all very suggestive, weird, surrealist horror movie, kind of sexually slanted stuff. Listed her as one of his favorite artists. Another one that he listed was a woman named Kim Noble, and I'll stop grossing you out with it after
You're
this.
upsetting me because you're describing Tony Podesta, who is the brother of the former White House Chief of Staff, two-time Chief of Staff John Podesta. But Tony Podesta is the most powerful Democratic lobbyist in Washington. This is not some fringe character. It's not a homeless guy, not even some eccentric rich guy. This is a person who's at the center of the Democratic establishment in the city.
For decades. Yeah.
For my whole life there. How brainwashed would you have to be not to see there's something really wrong there? Really wrong. Deeply wrong, spiritually wrong. I'm not trying to be judgmental or cruel. I don't understand how that could exist at the very center of power in Washington, D.C. That's
This gets to the question that we're trying to answer here. So another artist that he named as one of his favorites was a British woman named Kim Noble. And I don't think I could pull it up on my phone and show that to the audience right now without getting this video banned. But it is the most grotesque depictions of adults sexually abusing children that you can think of. However bad you think it is, it's worse. And this was another woman that was named as that he was a fan of. And so I just think to myself, this millionaire lobbyist in D.C. and his friends standing
the biggest
around,
Democratic lobbyist,
saying, what do you think about the artist Kim Noble? It's I think the image with the demon having the little girl filleting her while another demon urinates on her is just fascinating in its use of color. I mean, it's what you just. Who are these people? What is the culture of this place that he would feel comfortable inviting magazine photographers over to take pictures, to take photographs of the paintings he puts in his rooms? There's one of the paintings that he has by Biljana Đurđević that is just unmistakably two dead little girls lying on their backs in a pond or a lake or something. Just no question that's what it is. It's in the magazine.
But that means a lot of people I know went over to the Podesta's house and saw paintings of demons having sex with dead children or whatever. I can't even let that into my head. And they're like, yeah, it's kind of far out, kind of funky. They're sort of edgy, the Podestas. It's check yourself, dude.
Right.
This is hell.
How is it that every single person I know, that everybody listening to this knows and allows into their life, would run screaming off of that airplane when 6 underage girls in their underwear come out? The answer is, well, if you just came from a spirit cooking dinner and it followed up by a party at Tony Podesta's house where there's pictures of tied up dead 8-year-olds all over the wall, and then you go onto that plane, I
can vouch for that. I never went on the plane. I never went to the Podesta's house, but boy, did I live in a world of people who did. And not one time in 35 years in D.C. did anybody say, holy shit, I was at Tony's house last night. You should see what's in there. They were like, oh, it's douchey art.
I mean, look, you would get kicked off of a local school board for having pictures of tied up dead 8-year-olds on your wall. And so if you were going to say,
what's happening to your society? This is the seat of power. Its values flow downward.
It's
it's the top of the pyramid.
If there's some freak down the block who's just into weird stuff, whatever, you might tell your kids to avoid that house and everything, but fine. This is America. We interpret, at least until Israel attacked Gaza, we interpreted the First Amendment pretty broadly. Things like that, most people still do. Fine. I'm maybe not calling for that guy's arrest or anything. He can go be a freak in his own house. But you're not participating in the conversation or in the decision-making process of whether we do gender reassignment surgeries on 8-year-olds when you have pictures of dead, tied up 8-year-olds on your wall. And I think most ordinary people, and I think people who are in the Washington world and in a lot of these elite circles, they just don't get how this looks to the rest of the country.
It's not just how it looks, it's how it is.
And that becoming a mark of distinction because look, I am one of the most powerful, I'm the most powerful Democrat politician in the country. I can invite other people who in their worlds are powerful. I can invite them over to my house and have them walk by my paintings of dead little girls, and they're going to go home smiling. That's what I can do. And then you think of a guy like Jeffrey Epstein who takes it one step further and says, I wonder what else I could get away with. That moral compromise, the idea, the answer to that question of how could Jeffrey Epstein, when everybody in elite circles knew what he had done, why is anybody accepting an invitation to go hang out with this guy?
And can I say one thing that has always struck me about this case and why I think it's like revealing of the entire power structure in the United States? Epstein, and there was public testimony from women who lived with Epstein to this effect. His contempt for Americans, sort of normal, middle-class, working-class Americans, he did not see them as fully human. He didn't. And at all. So it's like molesting, a high school girl from housing development or a trailer park in South Florida doesn't really count as molesting because she's a prole. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
And that attitude suffuses our leadership class. Like, that is their attitude. Yeah, 100,000 people die of fentanyl ODs. Yeah, but I mean, people. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, it's sad, but it's not an emergency because they're like people you would never meet and you don't really care about. It's building their fucking dollar store in their town and like nobody cares about them. He really had that attitude, but that's the attitude they all have. That kind of thinking allows you to kill a lot of people, which they do. And so they have these conversations about, we need to do this or do that. But what you really mean is drop bombs on kids, which they do continuously. Yeah. And no one even mentions it. So the acceptance of violence against civilians, I've only started to realize this since I left. It's been 5 years. And I'm like, maybe there's a circumstance where you need to go full Dresden on somebody. Let's talk about it. But they don't talk about it. It's just like, well, we're gonna bomb the Houthis and like open the shipping lanes. What does that mean? Nobody cares.
Yeah,
because they have a total acceptance of killing people.
Why is anybody flying on the Lolita Express? What, like any of these things? It's a pathological obsession. I mean, Epstein was into girls with braces specifically.
Exactly. So what is that? And the conventional explanation is, maybe I'm being too honest, but I think this is really revealing because it's not about sex. It's a spiritual thing. And I said, what is that? And this friend of mine said, it's the thrill of destroying innocence. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And that is the definition of evil. That is Satan right there.
It's
taking something pure. I guess this is maybe, I'm the only person who never thought of this. Maybe you already have. I had not thought of that. I was like, it's not just a sexual attraction. Like, I think, underage girls with braces are hot. They're not. No normal person thinks that. That's bizarre. No, the idea is that I'm destroying something that's pure.
DC is the most cutthroat town in the country. They will take anything out of context if they have to destroy you.
I know.
And you got this guy who's literally displaying pictures of dead kids on his wall, never even comes up. Like, it's all just normal. It's all good. And you say, like, the people that are more interesting to me are the quote unquote ordinary-ish people who were going to that party and thinking that what they're looking at is normal.
It's a really rotten, decadent culture, I would say, at the top. And as evidence of that, Epstein gets out of jail in 2008-ish, 9. And then between then and 2019, so 10 or 11 years, he's like roaming around. We have records of like a lot of famous people hanging with him on his plane on the island during those years, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Like post-conviction, post-public humiliation.
Riding the Lolita Express. Yeah.
But that was after.
Yeah. Everybody knew.
And so who are those people? Can you name some?
A lot of the ones that have been in the news, Bill Clinton obviously rode. I think he's on record riding Epstein's plane 26 times. And just for reference on that, one of Epstein's buddies and partners in crime was a French guy named Jean-Luc Brunel, who ran a modeling and talent scouting agency and used it the way that Jeffrey Epstein would use Victoria's Secret, and they would also use it together. In fact, Jeffrey Epstein provided the seed money for the agency, and they would bring girls in and use that environment to sexually abuse them and take advantage of them. And when Jeffrey Epstein was in jail for those 13 months, in 13 months, Jean-Luc Brunel visited him 70 times. Okay, he didn't ride on his plane as often as Bill Clinton did, right? So that's just a reference point. And Jean-Luc Brunel, by the way, after Epstein got arrested, immediately went into hiding and then got caught trying to cross the border to flee France, got put in jail. And I will give you one guess and one guess only what happened to him. Oh, everybody watching got it right. He hanged himself in his cell.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did. Wow. How did all the people watching get that right on the first
You're
try?
making that up.
I am not making it up. I am not making it up.
Just like Robert Maxwell killed himself, just like Jeffrey Epstein did.
Just like the D.C. Madam. Now, one of the things we do have is he was very, very close with Ehud Barak, former Israeli prime minister, and he was the head of military intelligence for quite a long time. He was very close with him. He was photographed going into Jeffrey Epstein's house one time, like in a disguise. He stayed over for not overnight, but for longer stretches for a long time. Jeffrey Epstein provided the seed money for a tech company that Ehud Barak started up with a bunch of guys who were veterans of Unit 8200, which is like the Israeli NSA, basically a tech company. And when Epstein was in control of the Wexner Foundation, he gave Ehud Barak $2.3 million to write 2 papers, one of which apparently got written, but the other never even got written. They never asked for their money back, so just gave him $2.3 million. So very, very tight, close, big money changing hands. U.S. Attorney, future Labor Secretary under Donald Trump, was apparently on the record telling the people who were vetting him for the Labor Secretary job that the reason he cut that deal was because he was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. The more important question is, how does Alex Acosta not resign in protest when he's told to drop this case? How does
he wind up Labor Secretary?
And before he's sentenced, he flees the country, goes to Israel, stays there for several months, moved all his money offshore by this point. And while he's in Israel, he's telling people there that he's thinking about staying, because you can actually do that. They don't extradite, Jewish criminals, at least, who flee to Israel. There's a organization called Jewish Community Watch, which is a Jewish organization that tracks pedophiles who have fled the United States to go to Israel, where there's no extradition of Jewish criminals there. And between just the years, I think it was 2010 when they opened up, and 2016, 2017 when this story was written, so a period of 6 years, there were already 60 pedophiles from the United States that had fled to Israel and were living freely there. His plea deal was negotiated while he was out of the country, because he didn't fight the charges. It didn't go to trial, to a jury trial or anything. This is a guy who, again, over 40 on-the-record witnesses, most of them underage, corroborating each other's stories independently of this guy sexually assaulting underage girls for years. He gets this non-prosecution agreement with the federal government in perpetuity, him and all of his accomplices, known and unknown, for crimes known and unknown. We're talking about a man who was raping children. And if our government, the people who pass laws that we have to follow, or else have men with guns show up to our house and drag us off to a cage somewhere, the men who make those rules, men and women who make those rules, this is something that we have to draw a line in the sand and say, this is too far. You are going to dump all of this, and we don't care what happens. We want an explanation of what was going on here. And we're not going to take no for an answer on it. This is too far. It's just too emblematic. It's too severe of a crime. And I hope that I really hope that people will keep that mentality and not let this die until we get a good, satisfactory answer on what was going on.
I wonder what about what you just said would make Mark Levin call for you to be silenced and call you a criminal. I mean, here you are arguing against child molestation. You're not attacking anybody, certainly on the basis of like religion or ethnicity or anything like that. You're not even attacking any governments. That's my read on what you're saying. Why would that, your 2-hour and 40-minute description of this news story, why would that make someone like Mark Levin so angry?
I mean, I think when you see the constellation of commentators and personalities that have kind of immediately jumped to the side of there's nothing to see here, it's all over with, let's drop the case. It's all the same people who were telling us we were traitors if we didn't want to bomb Iran just a few weeks ago.
Oh, I know.
And so I think, and here's the funny thing about it, is I think that people like Mark, people like Ben Shapiro, a lot of these folks are actually, they're afraid, they have something like the pop understanding of what Jeffrey Epstein was about in their heads, and they're afraid that exposing the case will show his ties to Israeli intelligence.
And I would say anyone who doesn't want to get to the bottom of this, why?
I mean, there is no answer that's going to make sense to anybody that has sat through 3 hours of this conversation, already.
I agree
because
with that.
and to me, I don't think there is a good answer to that question. We should not compromise on this. We will get a satisfactory answer, or we will burn this place down. Figuratively, don't come knock on my door, FBI. But that we're not going to let this go. That this is a line in the sand. You will be honest with us about this, because if you can't. The nature of this crime, if you can't, then it means that this thing cannot be fixed, that you cannot be honest with us about anything. We can't trust anything you say if you're willing to lie to us to our faces when there is so much implausible, ridiculous information out there. Lie to us to our faces in such a brazen way about a guy who was raping children. Like, if you'll do that, then there's nothing more to talk about with the ruling class.